Hi everybody and welcome to this YouTube fly tying tutorial. The pattern that I'm going to tie for you today is called the deer hair ant. It's a pattern that I first learned about through a book of George Harvey's. His book is entitled Techniques of Trout Fishing and Fly Tying. This is a book that I've read years ago and just found to be a great resource. I recently stumbled upon it again and was just blown away by how much knowledge is truly in that book. If you get nothing out of this video, with the exception of going out to your local library or bookstore or finding it online, definitely check out that book by George Harvey. It's just got a wealth of information inside of it. Well, getting back to the deer hair ant, an ant is an incredible pattern that can be fished between May and around August, September, that time of the year. It's one of those patterns that fish will typically not necessarily be constantly feeding on unless there's just a steady supply coming down the stream. But whenever you have fish that are pretty much marked up on both sides of the river, and both sides of your local stream or creek, that's a really great pattern to throw, especially if that trout is looking up. When they are looking up, this deer hair ant is one that will just float really nicely on the surface and just has a great profile when that trout is looking up towards the top of the water column. It's a very simple fly to tie. I'm going to be tying it today on an Allen fly fishing hook, just a great hopper and terrestrial pattern. You really only need two materials aside from the hook. You need some thread and you'll need some dark deer hair. I'm going to be using black today, but you can also tie it in brown as George recommends. Finally, the pattern that I'm tying is going to be on a size 16, though I will even tie it smaller. For a lot of individuals that don't have great eyesight, I recommend tying it with some type of indicator or some type of high-vis material on top of the body so you can see it at a distance of around 30 to 40 feet if you happen to be fishing them that far away. This is just an all-around great pattern. It's a very easy tie, and I highly encourage you to check out this pattern as well as George's book. So without any further ado, I will show you the list of the fly tying materials, though it is pretty short for this deer hair ant, and then I'll get into the actual tying of the pattern. Okay, let's start tying this deer hair ant by George Harvey. Right now in my vise I have an Allen fly fishing hook. It's their N202. It's a hopper and terrestrial look. It's got a real nice bend to it. Perfect for this ant pattern. If you want to go with a standard dry fly hook, that's fine. You might have a little shorter shank and it might be a little tougher to get all those proportions, but it will work out. I'm tying this pattern in a size 16 today, though I will tie it anywhere between sizes 12 down to 20, 22 if you really see those tiny ants on the water. However, around a size 16, perfect for the carpenter ants. I've got a little 8/0 black thread. I'm just going to tie it in approximately the halfway point. Just get that out of there. Next, I'm going to grab a clump of some black deer hair. I'll zoom out so you can kind of take a peek at this. This is the type of stuff I'd like to use on this fly simply because it's a little more hollow. This is more of like that bass bug type deer hair that you'll use whenever you're creating certain patterns. I like that because it is so hollow and it will really help this pattern float a lot. I'm just going to pinch out a small amount. Less is definitely more on this pattern. I'm going to trim it. After trimming it, as with all their patterns involving deer hair, you want to pull out all this excess stuff. Get all that little under hair, and if you notice any small fibers, just pull those out as well. Next, we're going to stack these fibers, except though we normally stack by tip, in this case we're going to stack with the butt ends. So I'm just going to place those within my stacker. When I pull them out, they should be relatively close. For some reason, this deer hair does not like to stack as much as it does by the tips. So whenever you pull it out, if you notice there's still a few long ones in there, just grab your scissors. You can straighten them up. That's not a bad thing. All right, let me zoom back in and I'll show you how I'm going to tie all this stuff in and lash it all to the hook. Okay, at my tie-in point, I'm simply going to place the butt ends directly above and lash them in. I'm going to make sure I make an adequate amount of wraps to ensure that they're all lashed in, and then I have a smooth transition whenever I get to the next part of this. As I start to lash them in, then I'm going to just make some nice wraps towards the bend of the hook. When I get to that spot, which will be just below that bend, about a third or a quarter of the way down, I'm just going to lash this hair in approximately 5 or 6 times. And then I'll just wind back forward and stop. At this point, I'm going to double these over, and as I pull them over, I really want to make sure that they completely cover the hook on both sides. So you really want to make sure that they're even. Whenever they are, I'll hold them with my right hand, and with my left I'll just make a few turns of thread. I'm not bearing down by any means because I don't want to flare the tips yet. There's about 5. Now I'll rotate back to my right hand and just lock down a little bit more. Next, I'm going to pick up the fibers, wrap forward just a little ways, and I'm going to create this middle segment. As with before, I just want to double check that I have an equal amount of fiber or an equal amount of hair on both sides of the hook. And again, I don't want to flare it out too much. Alright, finally I'm going to pick these fibers up, or these hairs up one more time. Wind up to the eye and create the head of this ant. At this point, if you look at the 3 parts of this body, they're pretty much, the top 2 are the same size, and the back one's just a little bit larger. However, if you look at an actual Google image of an ant, as my wife and I have done, you'll notice that the head is definitely a lot larger, and it's very difficult to completely duplicate that head unless you're using some type of synthetic material. But a way to get that head just a hair larger, and this is the method by George Harvey. I'm just going to wind back a little bit, and then double those fibers back up on that first one. After I have them lashed in, I'm just going to wrap forward, do a quick whip finish, and get everything out of here. After I have my thread out of the way, now it's time to create my legs. For the legs, this is pretty simple. I'm just going to grab a few fibers from both sides. So I want about approximately 3 from the side facing you and 3 from the side facing me, and I'm just going to hold those fibers down. While I'm holding those down with my left hand, I'm going to reach up, grab the rest of these fibers, and hold them up. With the ones that are up, I can then take my scissors and trim them out of the way. The ones that I pulled down, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull them down one more time and then just trim them, thereby creating all of my ant legs. You need around 2 or 3 on each side. Don't worry about counting those and going completely crazy and trying to get, we'll say super specific with all of that. Now, the other thing my wife and I noticed when we were looking at Google images of ants is that where we tied off the legs right now, that may not be the only location where carpenter ants are tied off. In fact, we noticed that a lot of the legs can be tied off at this point right here, behind that second segment. So my advice to tiers, if you're trying to, just be very specific with this pattern, don't be afraid to either double those legs up. You can trim them after you've come up past that first hump, past the initial body, or you can also just put some hackle in there. Then you can wind that hackle, tie it off, and then you'll have those legs in both positions, which will definitely replicate this ant and be a little more specific. However, with that said, this is the finished ant. There are some great variations to this. In fact, I'm going to create a future video, and I'm going to show you how to make it a little more high visibility, but I'll just briefly tell you that you can simply add a piece of fluorescent yarn to the top. You can add some orange deer hair, and you can tie that in first and then bring the orange up so you can see it. Either way, you want to just make sure that whatever you add to the top of this pattern, A, it's not going to affect the floatability of it, and B, only you can see it. And you want to ensure that the trout cannot. They're going to be looking at this fly from the bottom. They're looking for the profile, they're looking for those 3 humps. So ensure that you have those and ensure that you have a few of those legs sticking out. Well, thanks for viewing this fly tying tutorial. Thanks go out to Allen Fly Fishing for the use of their N202 hopper and terrestrial hook. You can find those at allenflyfishing.com. If you have any questions or comments regarding this video or any of my others, please feel free to leave them directly on the YouTube page, or you can email me at tcammisa@gmail.com. Thanks everybody for viewing this fly tying tutorial of the deer hair ant.